What if I told you a shonen anime about firefighters accidentally built one of the most interesting takes on salvation and sacrifice in modern anime? And then, in the same show, gave its biggest glow-up to a guy who talks to an imaginary princess. That's Fire Force. Let's get into it. Intro: Fire Force, Enen no Shouboutai, follows Shinra Kusakabe, a third-generation pyrokinetic who joins Special Fire Force Company 8 to hunt down infernals, people who spontaneously combust and turn into monsters. On the surface, it's a firefighting shonen with a devil grin and flaming sneakers. Underneath, it's a show about who gets to decide how the world ends and who gets to save it. Segment 1: The World and the Setup. Quick context for anyone who hasn't seen it. Fire Force is set 250 years after a mysterious event called the Great Cataclysm reshaped the world. Ever since, certain people spontaneously combust and turn into infernals, mindless fire monsters that used to be human. It's the job of the Special Fire Force companies to hunt them down and put them to rest. And Shinra ends up in Company 8, a small weird unit that turns out to be digging into something way bigger than random combustions. A conspiracy tangled up with the church, a shadowy group called the White-Clad, and the real cause of the cataclysm itself. That's what makes the show work on two levels. Early on, it's monster of the week firefighting action. As it goes, it quietly turns into a conspiracy thriller about the nature of the world itself. And that's exactly where all the religious material starts creeping in. Segment 2: The Salvation Angle. Fire Force leans hard into religious imagery, and it's not subtle about it. Company 8 operates out of a literal church. The main antagonist faction worships a sun god. Characters talk about the Adala burst, the netherworld, reincarnation, prophecy. The whole show is soaked in scripture-coded language. And the deeper you get, the more it starts echoing a very familiar shape. A coming cataclysm, a chosen figure tied to fire and rebirth, people willing to burn themselves up, literally, so someone else can live. Shinra's own origin is built on a mother who sacrifices herself so her sons can survive. That's not an accident. Fire Force keeps returning to the idea that the world doesn't get saved by power alone. It gets saved by someone choosing to give themselves up for it. That's the same emotional core a lot of us know from the Jesus story. Salvation through sacrifice, not conquest. I'm not saying Fire Force is a retelling of the Gospels, but the bones are there. And once you notice it, you can't unsee it in almost every major arc. And honestly, I love that they went there. A lot of shonen anime settle for the power of friendship as the whole answer. Fire Force actually commits to the idea that saving the world costs something, that it takes someone willing to give themselves up, the same way Jesus saves the world in that story. That's a heavier, more meaningful message than most action anime even attempt, and it's part of why this show hits different once you catch it. Segment 3: The Cast of Company 8. Before I get to my favorite arc in the show, it's worth talking about why Company 8 works so well as a cast. Shinra is your classic grinning, big-hearted shonen lead, but he's surrounded by people who each pull the show in a different direction. Maki and Iris ground the team emotionally. Captain Obi is the quiet moral center, holding the whole unit together. Company 8 doesn't feel like a generic hero squad. It feels like a found family that genuinely has each other's backs, which is part of why the losses in this show actually land. And out of that whole cast, one character does more with less screen time than almost anyone else in the series. Segment 4: Arthur Boyle. Here's my favorite character arc in the whole series, and it's criminally underrated. Arthur Boyle. Blonde hair, giant sword, absolutely convinced he's a knight from another world called the Night King. Everyone treats this like a joke at first. He's the comic relief who thinks he's living in a fantasy RPG. But Fire Force pulls one of the best bait-and-switches I've seen. That delusion isn't a weakness. It's literally the source of his power. Arthur's connection to Adala, that shared subconscious dream world the whole cast is tied to, means his knight fantasy isn't just roleplay. The more he commits to the role, the stronger his sword actually gets. His confidence isn't cope, it's fuel. By the time the later arcs hit, the guy everyone laughed at is holding his own against enemies that terrify the rest of the cast, because he never stopped playing the character he decided to be. There's something genuinely great about that as a message. Sometimes the identity you choose to grow into becomes real, if you commit to it long enough. And it's a sharp contrast to a show that otherwise tells you power comes from bloodline and generation type. Arthur's power comes from belief. Segment 5. The animation and pacing. I also have to give credit where it's due on the production side. David Production handles the animation, and the fire effects genuinely hold up. The way flame is used as both a weapon and a visual signature for each character gives fights a distinct identity instead of blurring together. Where the show stumbles a bit is pacing in the back half, where the lore starts stacking faster than the emotional beats can keep up. It's not a deal breaker, but it's the difference between a great show and an all-time great one. Segment 6, my take. Fire Force isn't perfect. The back half gets convoluted, and it asks you to hold a lot of lore in your head at once. But between the religious undercurrent giving the story real emotional weight and Arthur's arc turning delusional side character into one of the most earned power-ups in the show, Fire Force is doing more than it gets credit for. If you've watched Fire Force, let me know down in the comments. Do you buy the Jesus parallel, or am I reaching? And if Arthur Boyle deserved more respect from the start, smash that like button so I know I'm not the only one. Subscribe for more anime and manhwa breakdowns. New one drops soon.